Are you ready to learn more about Salesforce platform events? Today I'm joined by the Salesforce product owner for the event bus. Not that kind of bus, but the Salesforce event bus, which is how we manage all of our Salesforce eventing. His name is Tyson Read, and he's going to talk to us about how we can think about scaling our integration tools, how eventing sits alongside other integration solutions, and share a cool pilot with us that's coming in the future. As always, please make all purchasing decisions based on currently available technologies, since we will be talking a bit about roadmap as well. And let's dive in and hear from Tyson. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Expert Corner. I'm super excited to be joined by the awesome Tyson Read. Hi, Tyson.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So we're super stoked to have you on today and to hear about some exciting stuff coming from admins, things that they can think about as they're architecting solutions, and to kind of introduce you to members of the admin community that maybe you haven't met yet. So one of my first questions, and I know you have a fun answer to this. One thing I learned last time we talked is that you actually were previously a Salesforce admin. So tell us a little bit about kind of your journey with Salesforce and how you became a Salesforce admin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out as a Salesforce admin way back when I was working as a wildlife biologist. And at the time, I was collecting a lot of data on endangered species. I was trying to figure out, how is there a better way to collect this data and also share it with my colleagues? And prior to that, we were collecting stuff with lots of different crazy spreadsheets and terrible Microsoft Word docs. And it basically meant that we were doing a ton of work and we could never compare any of our data or really make decisions on it. So not a great place for us to be in. And I started thinking about, how can we do this better? And the solution ended up being building a Salesforce app with the mobile SDK and a team of developers that I was working with. And we built a mobile app called Early Bird that allowed us to collect observations of protected birds and other endangered species.
That's a really cool intro admin story. That's awesome.
Thanks.
I had no idea you were a wildlife biologist who was also building mobile apps. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And so you're no longer out in the field.
Sadly not.
You're no longer out in the field. Now you're here with us at Salesforce. Tell me a little bit about what you do here at Salesforce.
Yeah, so at Salesforce, I work on the Salesforce event bus, which is part of what powers platform events and change data capture. So it's the technology that's at the center of a lot of the different event-driven architecture work that Salesforce does. To one, help customers leverage event-driven architectures and real-time architectures like streaming, as well as helping Salesforce itself use these technologies to build our own products.
Awesome. So when you talk about events, what really do you mean? Because I know, we want to make sure we're really explaining everything clearly to our audience. And I know that we're not talking about like Salesforce kind of core tasks and events, right? We're talking about something else. So let's talk a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So often when I tell people that I'm the product manager for the Salesforce event bus, they're pretty disappointed to learn that it's not that type of event or that type of bus. What we're talking about with events is, events really represent a change in data, right? So it's something that you can predefine of like, hey, this is a platform event where now my record meets these criteria. Let's publish an event saying that we've reached this milestone, and you can use those events to then trigger lots of downstream processes. And it's a super flexible tool to kind of build a lot of different things around.
That's awesome. So when we think about how admins are engaging with Salesforce and as they're architecting solutions and kind of evaluating what would they be doing with events, what are some examples that you can give us about maybe how Salesforce uses events or how admins should start to think about using this internally?
Yeah, so I think for an admin, there's a couple different ways that you can use events. Kind of the easiest is if you're using it just inside of Salesforce. So you can use a platform event is a way to kind of kick off lots of other processes. And a good example of this would be going into setup, and you can create your platform event declaratively. And then you can use Flow to publish that event. And you can also use that event as a way to kick off other flows. So it's a way to kind of reuse a criteria over and over again, which is really helpful. So there's one kind of on-platform automation way to use events. And then the other that's really common is using events as an integration tool to tie Salesforce together with other technologies.
And we actually are right in the middle of integration month here for Salesforce admins. So let's talk a little bit more about, how admins might be using platform events for integrations, and maybe some use cases that you've seen admins use, or even that we might use at Salesforce for integration as a solution.
Yeah, so one of the great things to think about is not only, what are the different examples of how you can put platform events and change data capture to work. You can also think about, you know, when would you want to use these? Because there's a lot of different integration technologies out there, and events aren't always necessarily the right tool for you. When I'm thinking about different integration patterns, some of the things that come to mind are thinking about, one, what's the overall complexity of all of the systems that you're trying to integrate? One pattern that we see often is that as organizations and companies grow, they end up having to integrate more and more things together. And if you only have a handful of integrations to manage, it's not really that big of a deal. Back when I was an admin, I was lucky. I only had one integration with SAP. So it's not a big problem for me. But if you've got a lot of different integrations that you're trying to maintain, it can quickly turn into a headache if you've got this sort of like spaghetti monster of different integrations that are tangling everything
Yep.
together. So this is one of the times where events really come into play, because you can integrate Salesforce with the event bus, and then you can then tie in your integrations to that event bus. And that means that everything is talking to the event bus instead of having lots of different, point-to-point integrations that can become really brittle and hard to maintain.
Yeah, well, we're all about trying to decrease tech debt, right? And we don't want our admins to be acquiring more tech debt and be acquiring a lot of, like you said, brittle systems. So that sounds like a really, interesting use case for admins to be thinking about, is as they're evaluating, available options for integrations. Is it something, are these use cases like, so it sounds like if maybe they have many things that they'd want to do inside of Salesforce with a connection, right? That's something that Event Bus might be a fit for versus having a number of different integrations set up.
Yeah. And a great example of this would be if you're trying to integrate, say, Salesforce with SAP and Workday and let's pick Oracle, right? Setting up a bunch of point-to-point integrations between all of them is going to be tricky, especially if you're trying to connect not just Salesforce with Workday and Oracle and so on. If you're trying to also connect them with each other too, like that quickly turns into a ton of point-to-point integration. So if you get it all into one central bus, you can have something that's a lot more flexible. And as your architecture changes and new use cases come on and you have to bring in different technologies, it's not as hard to tie all of that together. And then it also really enables you to scale too. One of the things that's great about eventing is it allows you to bring on really big, high-scale use cases and also do it in near real time, which is fantastic.
Nice. So you talked about, we love examples, we love existing customer use cases, and we're one of our own biggest customers, right? And so you talked about, I know when we chatted before, that there's actually some cool use cases of how Salesforce uses platform events. Can you share a little bit more with us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ones that's really straightforward is thinking about something like event monitoring. Event monitoring is basically a platform event where we're thinking about, hey, did somebody log into the org? Well, that's a login event, and that can get published, and then you can use that to make the security decisions that you need to make. So that's a really straightforward one. Another one that's pretty neat is thinking about the work that the Einstein team does around eventing, because they use events to kind of look at, hey, what's the work that a salesperson is doing in Gmail, And then they can tie that in to start using Einstein Prediction Builder to help deliver prediction results to a salesperson.
That's awesome. We love the Salesforce on Salesforce. I feel like it's always good to share how we have found kind of ways to use different tools internally, because a lot of times that's something that might be useful for our customers, and for our admins who are going to be building these solutions. So what are some of the different, as you've been talking to I know you talk to our customers a lot, you look at how our customers are using platform events and trends that are happening within this space. What do you see, for the admins out there that are thinking their 3 month, 6 month, 9 month plan for their orgs, and they're really trying to do that kind of long-term product management for their environments? What do you see as some of the biggest kind of growth areas for customers that are looking at using platform events, or where it might fit in?
Yeah, so I think, overall, we are seeing a ton of growth in eventing. We've seen just really significant increases. In the last year, we published about 83 billion events.
Hold
Yeah,
on, can we pause for a second? Can you say it? So in the past year?
in the past year, in 2020, we published 83 billion events. Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's a big
um,
number.
yeah, and just in let's see, and I think that we ended the year with about I think it was just about 155,000 orgs that were
Hmm.
using platform events.
Wow.
And some of this is customer usage. Some of this is them using Salesforce products that also tap into platform events behind the scenes. But
Hmm.
still, it just kind of gives you a picture of just how much adoption that we're seeing. So to kind of think about your question about, if you're an admin and you're trying to do some long-term planning about, how might eventing fit into my integration strategy, I think it's worthwhile to sort of start taking a look at, hey, what's the overall complexity of some of the integrations that you're trying to maintain? If you're not
Hmm.
already using eventing, is this a pattern that could be helpful? In particular, if there's any use cases that you have that are coming down the pike that are going to be really high scale, where you've got a lot of things moving in and out, that could be a useful pattern.
Hmm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I know it's, for admins, it sounds like looking at existing build, right? Like what do they have today? And if there's things that maybe they should be looking at replacing, if there's maybe a lot of existing integrations that need updating, like that sounds like a good opportunity to evaluate platform events as potentially a replacement. But then also, yeah, future builds is if it's something that's really big, at large scale, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when admins are out there who are, now super stoked on platform events, they're like ready to get hands on, they want to figure out where it fits for their org. What are some next steps that admins should be taking or could take to start learning more about platform events, or to kind of evaluate if it fits for them?
Yeah, so we've got some great sample projects that they can pick up on Trailhead. I recommend those. Those are always a great starting point. Um, and thinking about trying to, build some sample things just to kind of get a feel for, how do these work, and also, spend a little bit of time reading about event-driven architectures too. We've got a lot of different blog posts that they can check out to get a feel for how this might fit into their overall strategy, and sort of, whether this is a good fit for what they're trying to do.
Awesome. Well, of course, Trailhead is the first place to go to learn and get your badge on platform events and to learn more about how to get hands-on. And we'll make sure to link those blogs in the blog for this video, so you can get to those. Anything else that you want, Salesforce admins to know about as they're learning about platform events and as they're building these user experiences, like things that really should be front of mind for them as they go forward with this?
Yeah, there's a couple things I think would be worth thinking about for admins. One is that, if you're thinking about trying to integrate an external system with Salesforce, and you're setting up a subscriber that can listen to these platform events that are coming down.
Mhm.
One of the things that we're doing is we're building a new API that we're calling the PubSub API. And we're trying to make it easier for admins to, manage eventing outside of Salesforce. And up until now, one of the patterns that we'd see pretty often is, you'd use the streaming API to subscribe to events, and then you'd publish back with REST or SOAP or any of the typical enterprise APIs that we have. And that pattern works great. But one of the things that we wanted to do is we really wanted to simplify what it means to be managing eventing. So we've been building this new API where you can do publish and subscribe in the same place. It's also going to be a gRPC-based API. So that means admins can code this in any language that's supported by gRPC, which is fantastic. And on top of that, it also means that you don't have to spend as much time building a Comet D client, which we've seen folks, struggle with. Sometimes it can be pretty tricky to get those up and running. So we wanted to make it a lot easier by offering this API. And it's going to be going to a pilot in September of 2021. That's what we're shooting for. And we'd love folks to get involved, and we'd love to hear if it's of interest and if we can get you into the pilot. And if it is of interest, please reach out to me.
So this is going to be awesome. I know our admins love getting hands-on with pilots and love exploring new tools like this. So we talked a lot about platform events, and now we've got this new PubSub model. How should they be kind of thinking about the two compared to one another as they're kind of exploring different parts of the platform and thinking about these different models for their orgs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it can be pretty confusing because we talk about eventing a lot and we talk about PubSub. It's all the same thing. So, PubSub is referring to publish and subscribe, which is the model that you're using in eventing. And eventing is just, I guess, being a little less descriptive because it's not saying that you're publishing or subscribing. It's just saying that there's an event.
Okay, perfect. So they can think about it kind of in the same when they see it in content and see it talked about.
Same thing.
So this, all of these tools are going to be available to admins. This is so important as they really think about being the product owners, the product managers, the architects of their Salesforce environment. And there's a lot of decisions that as admins we have to make from kind of an architecture perspective, like what is these integration decisions that we're going to make look like, how we want to be able to scale. And something that you and I have talked about in the past that's so important for admins to really have front of mind and to really be cognizant of as they're making decisions like this is user experience. And I know that you care very deeply about how admins, the role they play in designing a user experience. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's great is that if you've got a good integration strategy, it means that you can deliver amazing customer experiences and amazing user experiences for the folks that are in your Salesforce implementation. Being able to surface information that they need to see, but doesn't necessarily live in Salesforce can make a huge difference for how successful your app is. And aside from, kind of empowering admins to build these great experiences for folks, one of the things that I'm really passionate about too is thinking about how can we make the experience of managing these integrations better for admins? In particular, I've been thinking about for eventing, how can we make this easier for folks to, one, at a glance, get an idea of what's going on with their org and also, kind of maintain like, hey, are all of my different integrations working? Are all of the subscribers that are consuming events, are they still up and running? Are they consuming events? What was the last batch that they got? How are my events being published? Is everything going through okay? Are there any processes that need to be retried just to keep everything moving? Just kind of really giving admins more information about what's going on in their implementations. That's another thing that I'm going to be working on over the next few months. And if there's an area that if folks have opinions about it, I would love to hear them. So, please, everybody that's out there, reach out to me. I definitely want to hear what we can do to make eventing easier for folks to manage.
And that's great to hear. We really want, admins, everyone listening to this, we care so deeply, our product teams care so deeply about that feedback. So, we really want to hear from you on prioritization. We want to hear from you on the Trailblazer community, on Twitter, reaching out directly to product teams, because these products are in the process of being built, right? And so this is where that admin feedback is so important as, the power users of this space of the application. Um, I love hearing about that. This is kind of an area that you're really thinking about and focused on. And we did have a safe harbor at the beginning of this video. So if there's anything else, in the roadmap that you want to share, we can talk about that too. Things that, might be relevant to our admins as well, because we do love hearing about, everything that's coming too.
Yeah, so another exciting change that's going on is it's a little under the hood, but it makes a big difference. Is that we're building out a new underlying runtime for the Salesforce Event Bus, and this is kind of in response to all of the growth that we've seen in eventing. Is that we want to make sure that we've got a really robust system that can handle everything that's going to be thrown at it, 5-10 years down the line as this pattern continues to grow and get even bigger. And we're really excited that we've been working on this for a little while now, and we're going to be putting traffic onto it in the next few months, and it's going to be tremendous to be able to unlock not only just a ton of scale that we can now take on. It's also really going to give us an opportunity to refresh the architecture of what's going on behind the scenes at Salesforce, and really just kind of improve how does the system work, and how do we make it more scalable, more reliable, and easier for other teams within Salesforce to use. So, I think that for an admin, what they're going to end up experiencing is going to be pretty much the same with what they get today. Over time, we're going to see, performance improvements as we get the system, more robust and more performant. But I always think it's pretty cool just to think about, all of the work that goes into these big systems that, enable all of these other products that we have to come out farther on.
It is cool. And I think it is important, even if it's not something that admins might be, dealing with in their day to day, if they're working with platform events, it's still, I think it's good for admins to always be looking at and thinking about where there's, continued improvements that are being made in different parts of the application, different parts of the platform, because that means that this is like a good time to be building right into platform events. Like it's something that's going to only get better. So as you're building into it, I think it's always smart for admins to, be cognizant of what the roadmap is for features that they're building with, and think about kind of that long-term planning for their own environments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whatever you build, it's going to get faster. We heard it here first. Awesome. Well, I'm so appreciative of you kind of diving into platform events and sharing more about runtime updates and event bus. Anything else? We've definitely talked about the pilot, and we'll be sharing any information about what Tyson talked about today. You either saw the links on screen here. The links are also going to be in the blog. Anything else that you want to share with our admin community while you're here?
No, I think that'll do it.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tyson. This has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time and, bringing more insight to our admin audience.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today, folks. That was Tyson Read with the Salesforce Event Bus. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a video like this, and I will see you next time on Expert Corner.